It's kind of obvious that not every Warframe is created equal. Tier lists exist for the sole purpose of ranking everything by how good it is at whatever it's supposed to do. Why does this matter? Well, in a game such as Warframe where PvE is the focus of the game, it's not uncommon for players to want to become as powerful as possible. Most of the time, tier lists essentially just serve as a way to effectively sort everything by what gives you the highest probability of progressing through the game, in the form of best weapons for damage or best frames for quote-unquote endgame. Of course, tier lists also serve as a way of showing how badly a game is affected by power creep. Old gear that was considered to be top tier back in the olden times is now treated as nothing more than relics of a bygone era. Weapons can become obsolete with just a single update. Because the game is still in beta, the design and meta of the game is in a state of perpetual shifting. As such, weapons often degrade over time in terms of power and usability, simply because better things come along, or because it's just not that powerful anymore. Warframes suffer from the same problem too, but at a much slower rate. A new gun or melee weapon takes a relatively short amount of time to make compared to a Warframe, after all. So why the hell does Warframe design matter to begin with? Because good Warframe design determines how well a Warframe will age over the course of the game, how well a Warframe fits into the game, and how well a Warframe can do at endgame areas. In short, if a Warframe fails in one of these three areas, they run the risk of becoming obsolete in the future, whether it be because of a newer Warframe or because their abilities just don't cut it anymore. Let's start with the first reason, age. Warframes rely on good design to carry them through the evolution of the game, because that's what determines if they'll remain just as good as they were on release. Take Loki as an example. Loki was one of the original Warframes from closed beta, and he is also the Warframe that has been changed the least ever since then. Why? Because there's no need to. Loki's entire kit is not built around damage, healing, or tanking, but rather, utility. Utility is special in Warframe because it's one of the few things that never falls off, no matter what enemy level is present. You don't need to buff utility, because there's no numbers or damage calculating formula that has to be adjusted. You don't need to rework utility, because it really doesn't get any simpler than pushing a button to do something instantly. On the other hand, having a design not built to last means that you'll have to change the same design every single time it becomes weaker than it should be or not as useful as it should be. Look at Zephyr. With the introduction of Parker 2.0, her appeal as the aerial maneuverability Warframe went down. As a result, she went from this to this. Look at Nyx. The femtosecond that DE announced that the upcoming Eidolon Warframe would feature mind control that just so happens to be better than hers, the entirety of the Nyx main player base went on suicide watch. Basically, if a Warframe's kit makes it unable to adapt when a future update comes, then its design becomes vulnerable to becoming bad, or just straight up being replaced. Now let's look at the second reason, role. An interesting thing to note is that a decently sized chunk of the top-tier Warframes are supports. If you haven't noticed by now, I'm not exactly a support player, so I wouldn't call myself the optimal person to talk about support frames. Thankfully, there's somebody here who's more than capable of fulfilling that task.
Hello there! Speaking of support frames, Harrow, Octavia, and Equinox are regarded as some of the best Warframes to take to a squad because they're capable of bringing multiple things in one single package. While there are other Warframes that are simply top tier because they do one specific thing very well, such as Rhino excelling at tanking, support frames are special because they can do a lot of things well, compared to just one thing. And also because support Warframes are a safe design. You can think of it like this. Even if Damage 3.0 were released right now and somehow resulted in the damage potential of Equinox becoming lower than Nyx's chances of getting a good rework, Equinox would still be playable, because damage isn't the only thing she can do. Because her design allows her to switch playstyles at the push of a button, and thanks to her abilities to heal and provide crowd control, she would still remain a very good choice for team play, even in the face of potential damage nerfs. Plus, if we count Equinox's augment mods such as Peaceful Provocation or Duality, she's still basically an unstoppable force even with just Intensify on her build. Octavia is in a similar boat. DE could dumpster Octavia if they wanted to. They can make her as squishy as non-prime Banshee. They could straight up reduce all her stats by half, and she would still be a fantastic support frame, purely because, as it turns out, being able to give your team the ability to be invisible potentially forever, all while ramping up their damage output, is pretty good. In any case, support Warframes will always be slightly above all other roles of Warframes because they're pretty good at what they do, which is a lot of things, actually, and because they're not as vulnerable to being gradually replaced like some other Warframes right now. The role of a Warframe hinges on its design to be good, because otherwise it could be disruptive, weak, or overall just not have a good place in the game. If any of you remember Limbo before he got reworked, he was a bother to play outside of solo, because his entire kit revolves around manipulating a rift, a mechanic which would piss off teammates to say the least. It also didn't help that Limbo's rift mechanics gave him the potential to intentionally disrupt his team by trolling, which was something that dwarfed even the likes of Loki's Switch Teleport and Vauban's Bounce. Now that he's been reworked, Limbo's a pretty good Warframe to play now. Maybe not as much in public squads, but he's still vastly superior compared to what he was before. If there's anything that really matters about Warframe design, it's that if the design is not good and the kit is just an overall jumble of abilities, players will just be scratching their heads asking, what the fuck is this Warframe supposed to do?
Thank you, TubeGirl. Now for the last reason, endgame viability. It's pretty self-explanatory why you don't see frames like Titania pull off multiple hour-long survivals. It's not because they're inherently bad, but rather because they don't have a reliable way of sustaining themselves for so long. Warframes rely on good design in order to also remain relevant once a player reaches areas such as Sorties or Elite Sanctuary Onslaught. If their design is poor, their usefulness becomes all the more lower. Imagine if we still had the old Excalibur, back when he still had super jump and his fourth ability was an exalted blade, but rather, radial javelin. Do you think he would be as popular as he is now if we still had that kit to his name? No. Having poor abilities makes a Warframe less of an appealing choice for any squad composition, which is something that Warframes such as Nyx and Wukong know all too well. If a Warframe is not capable of surviving in high-level areas, then its playability is decreased. To summarize, every Warframe's design can be graded with 3 questions. 1. Does the Warframe have a future-proof kit? 2. Does the Warframe have a clear and concise role? And 3. Does the Warframe survive in high levels? If the answer to all 3 questions is no, then you have yourself a poor frame design. A special thanks to Ms. TubeGirl for graciously providing her voice. You can check out her content and channel in the links below, and as always, thank you for watching.